This video contains discussion of sexual assault and in-depth breakdowns of scenes containing this content in popular media. Viewer discretion is advised. Hi, it's Daniel, and welcome to another educational video by The Entropy System. If you're involved in any online anime community, you have almost certainly either witnessed or been involved in conversations surrounding the new anime Goblin Slayer. Goblin Slayer kicked off this season by grabbing everyone's attention, but not in a very great way. What made Goblin Slayer stand out at first wasn't groundbreaking storytelling or genre flipping or fascinating new characters. The reason it made such an intense impact on anime viewers all over the world was for one reason and one reason only. By kicking off the beginning of its first episode with a scene of gratuitous, graphic sexual violence. As a result, there's been discussion on every social media platform from Twitter to Tumblr on how people feel about sexual assault being included in modern media. And that got me thinking about how I feel about this topic. There are those who believe that sexual assault should be as up for grabs as a storytelling device as any other trauma, such as murder, that is so prevalent in a fantasy genre. To this, I heavily disagree. Sexual assault occurs so frequently in this world that it simply cannot be treated like other shock value story elements. In the United States alone, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 6 men will experience sexual violence in their lifetime. With statistics like that, it is simply irresponsible on the part of a storyteller to use that specific trauma as a tactic just to shock their audience. Not only is that kind of shock as lazy from a storytelling aspect as a jump scare or gratuitous gore, but it isolates and triggers a massive part of the population, turning their personal suffering into a cheap trick. On the other hand, there are those that believe that sexual assault has no place in any story, and to that I disagree as well. Media like film and television hold power in this society. The stories that they share can reshape the opinions of the masses and garner sympathy or stir hatred in areas where it wasn't there previously. When American Sniper came out in theaters, there was a huge spike in violent messages sent to Muslim Americans. When Bambi came out in 1942, deer hunting in America dropped by half. The way a story is told can significantly change the public perception of a topic. If done right, a story including sexual assault can garner sympathy for and even empower survivors of that kind of trauma. But what does doing it right look like? To explain that, I want to focus on a few shows that I think did this topic justice. The first one I want to discuss is one of my personal favorite animes, Psycho-Pass. Psycho-Pass tells the story of a future where the government tries to keep the peace by carefully monitoring the mentalities and behaviors of civilians by scanning their brain. After each assessment, an individual is assigned a color as their psychopath. The darker the color, the more likely that individual is believed to commit a crime in the near future. Different levels of darkness lead the government to apprehend or even kill individuals to prevent crimes from being committed before they happen. In the first episode, a new recruit to the Public Safety Bureau is taken with her team to apprehend a criminal. This man has kidnapped a woman and done a number of terrible acts to her because, as far as he sees it, if he's going to be labeled as a criminal anyway, he might as well go all out and fulfill all his fantasies before he's taken in. When the Bureau arrives on the scene, the scanners label not only the man as a criminal, but the woman as well. Having just gone through a number of traumatic horrors, the woman is in an unstable mindset, and the undiscerning computer system orders the Bureau to kill her along with the man who committed these atrocities in the first place. The new recruit, seeing the reality of the situation, protects the woman and demands that she be taken in and given proper care and treatment. Later in the show, we check back in with the woman and see that After therapy, her psychopath has returned to a healthy, light color, and she is allowed to safely re-enter society without suspicion of committing a crime. In my opinion, this is exactly how a story should handle sexual assault. Through careful storytelling, we are shown what this woman feels as she survives and recovers from sexual trauma. The sexual assault isn't added for shock value, it's used carefully as a powerful storytelling device to show the inherent flaws of the psychopath's system. And despite the woman's minor role, she isn't treated as just a throwaway character. We're given insight into her personal experiences and even follow up with her later in the show. She's so much more than just a victim. She's a person with a full range of emotions and personal strength. Even though she's just a minor character, the writers went to lengths to ensure that the viewers could see her as nothing less than just that. Let's move on to another show, Orange is the New Black. Now, I know this show is problematic for a number of reasons, but if there's one thing that show did right, it was telling the story of a sexual assault survivor. In episode 10 of season 3, we see character Pennsatucky suffer not one, but 2 instances of sexual assault, once during a flashback and the other in present day at the hands of a security guard who she's grown romantically fond of. In both situations, as soon as the act begins, we see Pennsatucky fall limp and silent. One of the cruel accusations that often is thrown at survivors of sexual assault is, why didn't you fight harder? A lot of times, survivors of sexual assault didn't fight back at all. Why? Because it would have put them in more danger, and they knew it. Fighting back could lead to more pain, more physical harm, more long-term damage. So when we see Pennsatucky go limp and wait for the worst of it to be over, it seems like this reality of the trauma is finally seeing the light of day. Rape isn't always a stranger in an alley forcing someone to obey at gunpoint. Sometimes it's a person that the victim cares about very much, saying that they love them over and over while they violate the victim's body. Pennsatucky's story brings validation to this reality, to a public who may have been dismissive of it before. This episode was powerful, and I was actually very happy that it was included in the show. But if these are shows that did it right, what does doing it wrong look like? Let's start with Game of Thrones. This series is not shy to show graphic depictions of trauma. If anyone has their doubts, just point them to the Red Wedding and the argument is done. The showrunners are masters of jarringly shifting plots in tragic ways. That's one of the appeals of the show. The audience can never truly guess what's going to happen next. One episode, though, went too far. In season 5, the leading lady, Sansa Stark, is married to the soulless monster, Ramsay Bolton. For whatever reason, the showrunners decided to stray from the source material of the books and end the wedding night by having Ramsay violently rape his new bride. The raging uproar from the fandom was loud and immediate. The scene was added for seemingly no reason other than ending the episode on an uncomfortable note. We didn't need another reason to hate Ramsay because of the unspeakable atrocities he'd already committed during the show. We didn't need any more reason to pity Sansa because, again, we already knew the type of person Ramsay was. Sansa continues to experience abuse at Ramsay's hand, so her hatred towards him is justified 1,000 times over without the inclusion of this act. It does literally nothing to enhance the story or make the audience think. But in my opinion, that's not even the worst part of this scene. What killed me the most is what the camera focused on. While we hear Sansa's cries in the background, the camera takes a long, drawn-out shot on the face of character Theon, who watches helplessly from the doorway. We are shown his horror and fear as he witnesses this act until the screen fades to black. and this is not okay. Perhaps the director used this shot to avoid showing a graphic depiction of sexual assault, and for that, at least, I'm happy. Showing graphic details of sexual assault is not only unnecessary for emotional impact, but often makes these scenes more titillating than horrifying, which is exactly what a rape scene should not be. Focusing on Theon's reaction, however, is not a good way to get around this. We as the audience know sexual assault is horrifying. We don't need to see the reaction of an onlooker's face to understand that. It's like the dark equivalent of a laugh track, clumsily telling the audience which parts are funny. If you as a writer have to tell the audience how to feel, you're not telling your story correctly. What's more, though, is this isn't Theon's trauma. It's Sansa's. Sexual assault is already a dehumanizing act. By showing the bystander's face instead of the victim, the director is dehumanizing the victim even more by saying your emotions don't matter, or at the very least, your reaction to your trauma isn't as interesting as someone else's. Now let's compare this scene with the one from Orange is the New Black. Both scenes avoid showing the graphic detail of sexual trauma with almost the same shot. Same slow zoom, same facial close-up, same fade to black. But the difference is in whose face we're being shown. In Game of Thrones, the shot is saying, this is what you, the audience, should feel. Theon is horrified. Aren't you horrified too? In Orange is the New Black, the shot is saying, this is how the character is dealing with the reality that she's in. It gives the victim more dimension and humanity, rather than stripping them of that for the sake of shocking the audience. Circling back around to Goblin Slayer, that show commits the same crimes as Game of Thrones. Rather than allowing the victim to express her pain in a full way, we're shown the reaction of her friend instead. The audience is led to focus on themselves by seeing their emotions mirrored in this bystander, rather than being forced out of their own mindset to witness the struggles of the woman enduring the trauma. Sexual assault can be part of stories, and those stories can be told in good ways, but it all depends on who the story is being told for. Stories like this simply cannot be told for the sake of the audience. It's cheap, demeaning, and frankly, it's sick. These stories must be told for the sake of the survivors they represent. I know the topic of this video was a little heavier than stuff we normally dive into, and it doesn't necessarily have to do directly with DID, but since it's part of our own personal history and the history of a lot of systems, I figured that this debate was appropriate for me to weigh in on. I'm interested to hear your thoughts though. What do you think about sexual assault being depicted in media? Do you think it has a place, or should it not be touched at all? Do you have examples of shows or movies that you think handled it well? Also, I want to give a shout out to Abby and all of our other patrons who help keep this channel alive. If you're interested in becoming a patron, a link to our Patreon is in the description below. If you're interested in sending fan mail of any kind, our P.O. box address is also in the description below. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I hope you and Tropical Fish have a great day. Bye!